Two, one. Hey everybody, it's JC. I'm here again with Brown Mint Horror's Behind the Horror segment. This time, though, we're doing a little bit of a profile series. So today, who we're profiling is Mr. David Haight. He is a editor and director who comes to us as a new member of our family, a Brown Mint Horror family, with the indie horror filmmaking process. David, thank you so much for being on with us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for having me on.
Awesome, man. Thank you for joining us. Believe it or not, this is an AM version of the show. Typically, we are recording at night. It's kind of weird with the sun still being out that we are knocking this out. I've got my beverage of choice here today. It's 5 o'clock somewhere, so everybody partake and enjoy. All right, getting down to business here. David Haight, not spelled
Correct.
H-A-T-E, but 8 like the number.
Yes.
So have you played with that? Have you played with that at all on your marketing material or anything like that?
So it's spelled H-A-I-G-H-T.
Mhm.
And there's a street in San Francisco that was named after Henry Haight II. And that's where the hippies went. And I'm actually related to Henry Haight II.
Oh, cool.
By a very long history. So I have fun with my last name because if you go back and look at all the hippie stuff, my family is very much associated with, at least in name alone, with drugs and flower power and all that jazz. So it's my name is fun. I like to pretend that one day I'll have like the Haight and Ashbury sign in my office.
Yeah.
But those signs are much bigger than you think. And I
yeah.
like my wall space and I don't want it to feel cluttered. So I can't do that.
Well, speaking of wall space behind me, you can kind of see my discombobulated collection here. Do you have a collection in your home as well?
My collection is stored in so I used to have a very large dresser, but my DVDs are too numerous, and my wife does not want them cluttering the house, and I don't blame her.
Those damn wives.
I know. So I've got about 2,000 movies hanging around just in a dresser. Lots of horror films, lots of wrestling. Believe it or not.
Oh man, yeah.
A lot of wrestling stuff.
You got any old wrestling VHS?
So the one thing that I do have that is my pride and joy that I've got buried in a basement somewhere because all my VHS ended up in the basement. I have WrestleMania, I think it was 20, where Mickie James and Trish Stratus had their big match. And it was like the best women's match in history up until that point, right?
Yeah.
And I have the uncut version of that. And if you're, big into wrestling, gaffes, I guess, or the edited matches, there's something that happens in that match that Vince McMahon was not super pleased with and removed it from history.
Not very PG these days.
Very not PG. So I'm proud to say I still have that one. So I have a piece of controversial material sitting in my basement somewhere from wrestling history.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I could talk all day about wrestling, man. I grew up watching it. My mother used to work at Hippie, by the way. Used to work at a little local video shop way back in the day where you could still rent the VCR for the weekend.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember going in there, and amongst all the horror films that she would bring home, I got really into the old school wrestling. Mm-hmm. They had one little you go in and turn right, and there'd be one little like cubby section, and it was loaded spine to spine with old wrestling VHSs. Yeah. And that's how I grew up seeing those covers of like Survivor Series 93 and like my first I guess how I got into horror one way was through The Undertaker.
Oh yeah.
And that was he scared the crap out of me when I was a kid, man.
A big walking zombie. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you remember just real quick, do you remember those first few casket matches with Yokozuna and Kamala and stuff like that was depicted? You're a little kid seeing that. You're like, oh my God, they're burying that guy.
Yeah.
And then
but they had to get the biggest caskets imaginable.
Right.
Like literally they're just chests. Like they're not really a casket.
Right.
Because Yokozuna wouldn't fit in a normal casket,
Right, exactly. We'll have to have you back on and talk wrestling one day.
Absolutely.
So David, we've shared a little bit of our backgrounds and stuff like that, but tell me, how did, you grew up in Wisconsin, right?
Absolutely.
So you hail from Wisconsin. I'm originally from a very small town here in Middle Tennessee, but made my way to Nashville back in 09. So how does a kid from Wisconsin grow up and, you're working your little jobs, maybe you're getting a car and stuff like that, and you're growing up, and then how did you get involved in film? Like, how does an average Joe get involved in independent horror filmmaking or filmmaking in general?
So I've always wanted to make movies, and I can remember as far as middle school, just writing like short stories and stuff like that. You get sentenced to some detention and school suspension, stuff like that. And you're like, okay, well, yeah, I'm bored, so I'm gonna write. And I can remember that we made a weird video for like our English class, and in that video, like I was like being supposed to be dragged by a dog. And everyone's like, how are we supposed to do this? And I remember I pushed myself and made it look like I was being dragged by a dog. And they're like, oh, that worked really well. And I'm like, yeah, it did. I was like, oh, I can make this kind of work. So then in high school, I was part of the film club, and my high school specifically had 4 houses to it. So 4 academies. It was called Indian Trail Academy. Now it's Indian Trail Academy in high school. And I was part of the communications house. And in the communications house, you did the morning announcements. So you worked on production equipment that would get shown to our public access stations. And there was a film club that was associated with the club, with the academy as well.
Yeah.
And I was one of the founding members of that. And the first movie we made was a short horror film. And I was like, wow, this was a good idea. This was fantastic. I really enjoyed doing this. And I made a couple of films with just some friends, and I made a couple of films with some of my cousins.
Yeah.
And by the time I'm in college, I want to study film. I want to be a wrestler, number one.
Of course.
I wanted to also, by the time I was 40, I wanted to retire. Then I wanted to go ahead and, be a world famous director by 42, writer, novelist, and
right. You've got the film stuff by 60. Laid out. You got the plan all laid out.
I had the whole idea. Did not work out super great. At least not for my high school mind. It'd be very sad. But for me right now, I'm very excited because now I've made connections with people in town. I've made connections with people who are in, LA, people who are out in New York, a lot of people down in Chicago. Kenosha, I don't know if anyone geographically knows where Kenosha is for this podcast, any of your listeners, but Kenosha is smack center between Chicago and Milwaukee. So we're about a 40-minute drive from Milwaukee. We're about an hour drive from Chicago. And that's only because I-94 is horrendous. Yeah. So it's easier for me to connect with people. And if you know anything about Milwaukee, you know that Milwaukee has one of the most prestigious film schools in the world. I think about 10 years ago, it was in the top 10 universities for studying film. They do a lot of art house. So I've made a couple of films with some students who are out there. And then that, just steamroll down into Chicago, where I met up with some filmmakers who keep bringing me on to do editing work. They want feedback on their writing.
Yeah.
I did some assistant directing for some of them. Almost all of them exclusively horror films, believe it or not.
So real quick, what was that? Okay, here's an example. So here I am working retail, and a buddy of mine and I kind of start this Brown Mint horror thing, right? Goes on for years, just as a Facebook page and stuff. Excuse me. And with, YouTube and, everybody having their own interests and stuff like that and being able to get that out there, I thought, man, it'd be really cool if we could, why don't we do some reviews, some movie reviews? So we ordered Horror Pack, which is where you get movies every month from the subscription-based service. We started doing those unboxings and doing videos of those. And then I thought, man, it'd be really cool if, I see these guys like Cool Duder and these other YouTubers like Wet Movie One that get films sent to them. I'm like, how the hell do you get a distribution company to send you stuff to review? So sitting here, in the old film library here, and I'm like, I'm just going to reach out and see what happens. So, I mean, I reached, we try to promote indie horror here. You know, we're all about indie filmmaking. So I just Google searched and found Midnight Releasing and Samaria Entertainment, shot them an Instagram message, and bada bing, bada boom, we had some DVDs. And then she started hooking us up with people, directors and actors to actually interview. And it was amazing. You know, I always tell people, don't ever underestimate the power of a phone call or a text or, you know, any kind of open communication, you know, throwing the line out there. So is that similar to you? Like, did you just kind of like, I'm going to try this and see what happens, or what?
Yeah. So I decided in like 2016 that I was going to build my own computer so I could do editing.
Okay.
And my first job was $50 with like 7 edits, and that was horrible. They actually got their project off the ground, which was fantastic. I'm very happy for them. But you just kind of take the jobs as they come.
Yeah.
And, you know, at first they're not going to come like at all. I would say within the first year, you know, I was working for some people who didn't know anything about what they were really doing. You know, they were learning just like me, but I think their management skills weren't where they should have been. And I come from a background of retail management. And,
Same.
you know, I was a substitute teacher. So, you know, I know how to control a
together.
chaotic environment, you know, better than most.
Yeah.
So like I saw the flaws, and when you start seeing the little flaws like that, you start picking up on what not to do.
Yeah.
So when you start working with other people, you can pick up, is this person going to do something like that last guy did? Or is this director going to do something like the last director did? And if you're picking up on that, you start being nitpicky, saying, I'm not going to work with this person, but I'll actually work with that one because that one's got some traits that I like.
Yeah.
And then they realize they like your traits. And then it spirals. I actually was working on a horror film that was shot in Kenosha called I Dream of a Psychopomp. It's actually going to be screening twice at the Milwaukee Film Festival.
I rewatched the trailer today. It looks really good.
It's fantastic. And I got to be assistant director, do some BTS on it, which was great. And the guy who directed it went to high school with me and middle school with me. You know, we didn't really talk either of those times. But, you know, we ended up meeting up later on in life. We're like, oh, we got a lot in common. This is fantastic. I actually literally just borrowed a green screen from him so we could shoot a trailer for a film festival that's coming up. So from that experience, I had a DP who works in Chicago, who runs their own company, who does very big work, you know, with larger scale productions. And he got picked up to do something for a short film. And that led me to meeting one of my favorite people, Frank Tovar, who lives down in Chicago. He's a fantastic director. He's a great writer. And from him, I was able to work on 2 short films as assistant director. And because I've built that connection, I get more options to be an assistant director now than I do editor. Well, I get more options to be an assistant director on set and have people trust me that I can help control that environment.
Yeah.
And then my post-production stuff, we've actually been good enough that Critical is actually my post-production company that I now run.
Nice.
So yeah, you know, all you have to do is put your feet in the water, and if it gets too hot or too cold, take them out, put them in a different pool, and see how that works out. And eventually you're going to find your team. And right now, like, we have a fantastic team. We're planning a lot of big stuff coming up over the next few months. I know 23 and 24 of the next couple of years are going to be amazing. I'm looking forward to it. I'm incredibly nervous. I sweat most days, but it's a very exciting time for us because now we have the resources, the team, and the ideas and the know-how to execute stuff. And I think that's where a lot of independent filmmakers are trying to get.
Yes.
We're not going to be perfect. We know that. We know that we're going to learn all the things that we shouldn't do, but in the next couple of years, we'll be not doing those things and we'll be even further progressed, which will be fantastic.
So let me ask you this, just based off that last statement you said, independent filmmaking, especially in the horror field, everybody seems to have a lot of fun. And I mean, there's pain points with every piece of filmmaking, but from way I've taught from the conversations that I've had with, you know, say someone who's working on a drama or someone's working on an action, it seems like they have a lot of fun. You and, you know, people who are in the production company and stuff like that seem to have the most fun, actors included, on horror films. And I don't know if that's because they get a chance to cut loose, or they get to be laid back, or everybody's just kind of having fun. Nobody's really taking things seriously. They're taking the work seriously, but not, the whole thing seriously. It's not like, you have to cry on demand, or, hey, I really need you to be, really dramatic right here.
Mhm.
From the conversations that I've had with the filmmakers, the way I've spoke to, that seems to be the case. Where was I going with that? The next projects that you have coming up, can you tell us a little bit about those?
Sure. So right now on YouTube, there is a concept short called Charlie and the Empty Factories. It's directed and written by a guy by the name of Tony Ramos out here in Racine, which is just about 10 minutes north of us in Kenosha. And starting at the end of the month, April 30th, they're going to be shooting the second half of what they started shooting last year, which is part of the feature length for that film.
Okay.
So that's one of like the big fun projects that we have coming up that's going to be horror themed. It's about a guy who's just going through and trying to find the remains of his friend who have, become reanimated. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, I think when it comes down to horror sets, you have the expectation on a drama or, an action film where, the material itself can be daunting. Really isn't the word. I would say maybe heavier than you might expect. You're writing it, if it's a drama, we have to have this very, deep emotional scene. We have to have this very specific line delivered to generate feelings later on in the movie. And that's not to say that doesn't happen in horror, because 100% does. But I think when you're there on a horror set and you have to scream your lungs out for 2 minutes, at the end of that 2 minutes, you're like, God, that was ridiculous. And everyone around you realizes that was ridiculous. And you have a chuckle. I think you get covered in blood or special effects makeup, and you look at yourself, you're like, and you take that photo. That actually happened to us. We were shooting a short called The Damn Thing, which is another short horror concept for a feature that we're hoping to produce. And the actor, whose name was Mike Detterman, won a Best Acting Award. He's not generally an actor, so we're very proud of him for what he executed. But it's perfectly to my point. So we're in a field and we're walking back to the parking lot, and he's still covered in effects makeup and blood and prosthetics, showing his face all gashed up. And we walk past an older couple, and they're looking at him like, oh my God, what happened? Did you fall? Like, you stop tripping off of cliffs, dude. Right. And he's like, man, mosquitoes were horrible. And he just kept walking and left them there stranded. And they're just looking around like, oh my God.
Oh man, that's awesome.
I think horror sets have that option to have that levity,
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a camaraderie that you can build on a horror set where you're like, yeah, I spent, 10 hours, putting makeup on your face so you could have a 1.5, minute scene that might get cut later. So you get to be really chummy with people because you realize that there's a lot of ridiculous aspects to horror, but that's the fun of it. And I don't
speaking of ridiculous aspects,
genres. Sure.
Yeah. Speaking of ridiculous aspects, I'm I'm on the horror hunt the other day, right? Because I know yours are put away, but mine are back here. Physical media hunt, and I'm like, just looking for things, and I happened into a Dollar Tree, and I'd saw some other fellow YouTubers that go in there, and they sometimes have horror films, for like $1 or whatever, right? And I went in there, and sure enough, found one. It's called Rubber. Have you ever heard of that?
I have. It's the tire one, right?
Yeah, it's about a damn tire that goes around killing people. Haven't watched it yet, but as far as I'm eager. As far as recent films I've checked out, I watched the Belko Experiment for the first time.
That was a good one.
About 2 days ago.
The Belko Experiment.
It was different. I thought it was kind of funny seeing Patrick Swayze's best friend from Ghost is like the main guy.
Yep.
Seeing him in there, and what a concept. The fact that they were all microchipped or whatever, basically, with these bombs, and then you know, it was a battle royale essentially. So,
Yep.
So watch that. Have you seen anything good recently, horror film wise?
I just rewatched The Lighthouse, so that was really good.
Eggers, yeah. That new Nosferatu,
Oh, that looks so good.
what concept artwork, whatever dropped or whatever.
Yep.
I think he's going to be great in that. Willem Dafoe.
It'll be the second
Man.
time he's played that character, technically.
Because he played it in what SpongeBob or something like that.
No, he played it in Shadow the Vampire.
Oh, okay.
Which was a retelling of F.W. Murnau and his like actual creation of the film.
Oh, okay.
Where they take Max Schreck, his character doesn't exist, and he's actually just Count Orlok, and you realize that he's literally slowly killing off the film crew.
Oh, wow. I need to check that out.
Yeah, it's fantastic. John Malkovich is F.W. Murnau in that one.
Oh my God. I'm putting that on the list.
Yeah, you got to put it on the list. It's pretty great.
Yeah, checking that out. Let me ask you a question. Since we're talking about films, Terminator, the original.
Yeah.
Sci-fi. I think it's a horror film.
It's a horror film, yeah. 100% it's a horror film.
I think it's 100% a stalker-based horror film. Who we don't necessarily have a Dr. Loomis in this, but we have a Reese who is protecting the heroine there. I can remember I watched that when I was a kid, man. When I was like probably like 8, and I remember having nightmares from that movie.
Well, he literally rips part of his face off, man.
I mean, yeah, rips part of his face off.
He takes out his eye and everything. Like,
I think Jim Cameron. It sucks that we don't have an actual horror film by Jim Cameron, because I think he didn't know, or maybe he did. I don't think that he knew what he was doing was going to have an impact later on like the slasher world, because Arnold's just an unstoppable force in that movie. The Terminator is an unstoppable force, and like it's kind of like It Follows. Like he will be coming the entire time, and there's no stopping him. Thoughts on that? Am I right?
I think you're right. I think the fun thing about the horror genre is that a lot of other genres can very easily slip right into it. You just have to have your subject material just tilt a certain way. And I think definitely Aliens, or, even Alien,
Oh yeah.
You can make the argument that it's hard sci-fi or it's hard horror either way, but it's really it's a melting of the two, right?
Right.
Same thing with Terminator. If you go back to 1980, where, special effects like that were actually, they're brand new, and Terminator was shot for super cheap.
Yeah.
So having the prosthetics of Arnold looking like that, and even just there's one where it's just like a mold of his head, right? And it's just looking in the mirror.
Yeah, where he's like cutting his eyeball out and stuff.
Yeah. It's super uncanny valley, right?
Yeah.
But back then you didn't have that sense of the uncanny valley that we do now. You don't have massive CGI coming out of the 1980s, and you're saying that just looks completely fake, right? You're sitting there like, oh my God, like he's literally just a robot with skin on him in that scene.
Right.
And that's really unsettling.
Right.
So it's definitely 100%. It falls in between the two, like technically between the three, horror, sci-fi, and action. But all the same, I think that was, and that's really the way like all of these big like tentpole horror films, most of them anyways, start off. If you look back at Jaws is a horror film, very much so a horror film.
Yeah.
But then you go, Jaws 2, 3, 4, it's sure, I think they fall more into schlocky action than horror. I think they lose their way a little bit there.
I tell you what, the Amityville series, the Amityville name just got slapped on everything.
Oh yeah.
Here lately, it seems like, or from what I've been reading, but like when you look at one, you're like, okay, horror flick. And then I'm on the side where I prefer 2, the Possession over the original.
Yeah.
I think that you've got a little bit deeper of a story. I think because it's based off the family that lived there prior to them, the DeFeos or whatever.
Yeah.
You've got Burt Young, which is Paulie from Rockies in there. He plays a great role as the abusive dad.
Yep.
That whole slowly being possessed, and like the special effects were great. Dude, that scared the crap out of me when I was a kid when I watched that one.
Oh
And then like you had the third one with Meg Ryan. I didn't get into that one. I don't think I really saw any of the others. I think I just saw those first two. But yeah, that second one, man, was fantastic.
So actually a funny thing about Amityville Horror, the remake with Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah.
Was actually shot about 30 minutes. Well, a fair bit of it was shot about 30 minutes from where I'm sitting right now.
Oh, for sure. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Nice.
Which is pretty great. There's actually a company out here called Rainy Day Productions that is run by BJ Rainiac. And BJ was a PA on that set.
Wow.
He just showed up every day. And they're like, hey, let's just get you on, I guess. So,
wow.
That's kind of like how it is in the Midwest. Like you show up, and if you keep showing up, you're on the crew. And if you want to stay there, you can stay there.
Wow.
That's the fun thing about us. We don't care. We'll take who we can get. And if you show up and you do the work we're asking you to do, and you're not a jerk, we'll keep you.
Right on. Well, hey, let's take a little time to discuss your upcoming projects that you said you're working on. And kind of maybe a little bit of the story behind those. You said you've got The Damn Thing, which is a concept.
Yep. So The Damn Thing is a concept. It's based off of a short story by a gentleman named Ambrose Bierce from, I think, 1893. Ambrose Bierce, for those who don't know, was a war correspondent for the Civil War. And later on in his life, he wrote a lot of short stories. He went missing in Mexico, from Mexico or New Mexico. I can't recall off the top of my head exact. But he was one of the first writers for American Gothic horror. The Damn Thing is really just a story about a man who is killed in the woods somehow. People think it's a bear attack. His friend goes out there to, settle up his affairs, and he's looking into the woods. A dog is barking into the woods, and he's staring out the window from this cabin, and he doesn't see anything, but he sees a shimmering. Like something is there. Something is watching him. There is a presence there, but he can't see it.
Gotcha.
It's the damned thing. So, that's one of the inspirations for Predator. If you look at Predator and so that's one of the inspirations for Predator. It's actually been adapted to short films several times. I think it was adapted. There was a horror series. I think that was on MTV or something a few years ago, 15 years ago, probably, that, would take short stories and, adapt them to like 1 hour concepts.
Yeah.
So it was adapted there, not as well as I wanted it to be. So that's why I was like, hey, I read the story in college, and I was like, hey, this is a good idea.
Right.
Found a small crew after working on a couple of 48-hour festival things, and decided this is an idea that I want to pursue, and we wrote an adaptation of it, shot it. It's going to be screening at a festival coming up here in Kenosha.
Tell us about that festival. I keep hearing about the festival.
That festival. So Kenosha, over the last couple of years, has been in the media for some not so great things. You had Jacob Blake and that incident with the police department down here. And then you had Kyle Rittenhouse shortly after coming through. And then you had, of course, the presidential candidates come through here. And, basically Kenosha felt like it was being mocked. We've been doing a lot to make the town better as best we can over the course of the last 20 years. We used to have I think it was Chevy who was here, and they jumped ship, left everything in shambles. There are certain parts of Kenosha that are brown zones. You can't build anything there. You can't exist there without the space being deep cleaned, with a lot of engineers and a lot of money. Kenosha cleaned up their downtown. It's really beautiful. It's picturesque now. But then you have those events come through, and it just takes you back 10 years, and it doesn't feel good. So I realized that we had a lot of really good horror films coming out of here. Our film community is actually really strong. We're putting out quality. And, sometimes we don't get the recognition from our community that I feel like we deserve, and that, a lot of the filmmakers in the area feel like they deserve.
Right.
The fun thing about Kenosha is a lot of people, a lot of kids, like to say it's nowhere, that it's right between Chicago and Milwaukee. So why am I going to bother staying here? I'm going to go live in Chicago. I'm going to go live in Milwaukee. I'm going to go live somewhere else. This place is horrible. And when you get to the bare bones of it, that is just a perpetuated myth from 20 years ago that these kids are just being told.
Right.
There's a lot to offer here. So my wife and I, we're going to do a showcase over at one of the local universities of all just the short horror films.
When is that?
What's that?
When is that?
So the showcase is no more now. It's turned into a full-blown film festival.
Oh, okay.
So my wife told me my idea was bad. As
they do that. Yeah,
they do that.
They keep us in check.
She definitely does. But she was right. It was a really small idea that wasn't going to pull in a lot of people, wasn't going to get us any of the recognition that we were looking for, and it wasn't going to pull in anyone who maybe we don't know in our community that's making films. So we decided to launch a full-blown film festival, an international one with a highlight of Midwestern and local filmmakers. And we've just been steamrolling ever since. So we launched in January. We've gotten lots of submissions that are really good. And we've even started pulling people from Kenosha who are filmmakers out of the woodwork that we didn't even know. We thought we had everyone accounted for. And then all of a sudden someone submitted and I was like, oh, I don't know this person. Let's pull them in really quick.
Yeah.
We got people who used to live in Kenosha who are submitting. We have people who, from Milwaukee, Chicago. We've gotten submissions from Australia, Spain, Saskatchewan, Quebec. Ones from, Nevada, New York. It's just all over the place. And
wow,
this is an opportunity for us to. You should totally be there.
I want to do some coverage. That would be so awesome.
We would love to have you out there. We've been able to secure a special guest judge who we're going to announce, at the beginning of June. We have a lot of fun stuff that we're able to just do, and it's all because we wanted to make sure that we had something positive for Kenosha.
What's it called? What's
called
the
Port of Fear Film Festival. Kenosha is a port town on Lake Michigan, which is one of the largest bodies of waters in the world. And it used to be where, the car industry, in Kenosha would, bring in all their products.
Right.
There's a lot of fishing out here. It used to be, it's beautiful. You go out there and you do your charter fishing, you come back, and it's relaxing now. It's no longer just business, but, we're bringing back that fear, are we going to go down with our ship?
Yeah.
Hopefully we don't, but there's about 1,000 ships that have sunk in Lake Michigan. So.
Oh, really? There's a story.
Oh yeah, it's deep. It's
really there's
deep.
A story for sure. What time frame are we looking at? When does this take place?
So this is on July 30th of this year.
My birthday. Are you serious?
Oh, even better. We'll have you out. We'll bring a cake.
Oh yeah, we're doing it.
Oh, let's do it, man.
July 30th.
July 30th. We haven't ironed out exactly the time because the more submissions we get, the more we want to try to include and the more that we can offer to our community.
Probably like an
most likely
event.
It'll be, yeah. We still have time before, tickets are technically on sale, but we haven't launched anything yet because we want to make sure that we have a lineup 100% secured for that.
Absolutely.
So we're looking at probably between like 1 and 7 o'clock. We're most likely looking at 2 locations inside of one large theater. We're trying to bring in food trucks, local artists, a lot of local vendors. We have some local breweries that are going to be hosting some kickoff events and some after parties for us. And cool. We've partnered with some students from one of the high schools out here. And we're doing a challenge as well. It's a 5-minute horrors challenge. They'll have 48 hours to shoot 5-minute films. We have, I think, 5 teams as of today, and they're going to be the opening block of the film festival, which is going to be completely free for them, their families, and the community. So we're making sure that everyone knows, like, this isn't just about us. Like, we're trying to build the community that we sit here and, we think that we know everyone. We don't. So let's bring them all in and let's have a big old happy family, come together and let's make some better films going forward, bigger films, and help spread the ideas that everyone has,
Man, we'll have to talk offline a little bit about that. Maybe I'll ask you some lodging tips and stuff about up
Oh,
there.
absolutely. We've got some places for you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if we could take the last few minutes here, what I'd like for you to do is, this is something that we normally do on each segment. We'll pretend you're Tony Robbins or a motivational speaker for a sec and give you a soapbox. If there's someone out there, obviously there is, that are interested in getting in the filmmaking industry, being a director, being a writer, what have you, what advice would you have for them in today's time? Phone.
This is a camera.
Yeah.
This is a screenwriting app. This is location scouting. This is music options. Just do it. This is a microphone even. Just do it.
Yeah.
If you have a smartphone nowadays, you have more resources than anyone else did 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and they were still making films then. Make your movie. You might get lost in the shuffle. You might make something you hate, but at the end of the day, you're going to learn more by doing it than not doing it. If you have an idea, go for it. It may not be perfect, but you'll have something to show for it at the end of the day.
Amen, brother. Amen. I think, sometimes about if someone like Cronenberg or Carpenter or any of those guys, back 30, 40 years ago, what would have happened if you come to a time machine and swap out their Super 8 or whatever for like an iPhone Pro or something, and then show them how to do whatever, and they're like, what do you mean I could, how much more footage would have been shot? And they would just be so excited about it. And now, we use them for social media and stuff like that. We don't realize the power that these things actually have.
Yeah. Well, here's the bigger question. How many of those guys wouldn't have been anywhere near as big if everyone had those resources and they weren't the only ones who had access to film equipment?
So what do you do to set yourself apart?
Exactly. Nowadays you have access, but it's harder to set yourself apart. Back then it was easier. You were maybe 1,000 filmmakers in the US who had,
man,
money. Nowadays you don't need money.
Well, I want to hear, I want you to keep us posted on the Port of Fear Festival. If you've got any kind of links or anything like that,
Absolutely.
that we can throw some propaganda up and bring awareness or whatever. I seriously, I want to come. I don't think that's too much. It's my birthday. I don't think it's too far away.
I will legit get you a cake, sir.
That's awesome.
I'm not even joking. I will have a cake for you.
That's cool. David, I want to think, I feel like we're cutting everything short, but I think we said everything we wanted to say today. I'd love to have you back on. Maybe I could have you partner up with me on a couple of the behind the horror segments, interviewing some directors and stuff. I love your energy. I love what you're doing. I love that you're so excited to be involved in what you're doing. Same as me.
Oh, yeah.
And that really speaks a lot. So, on behalf of Brown Mint Horror and myself, I want to thank you for being our guest on the show today. And we're going to plug Port of Fear and all your stuff. And is there anything you need from us?
Just share the Port of Fear Film Festival on all your social media.
I will do it, sir.
Book a hotel today.
Book today. Book your trip today,
sir.
Exactly.
I got a hotel in mind for you, even.
What is it, your spare bedroom?
I do have a spare bedroom, although my bed is not working. It is an air mattress and it is flat now. So I'll have to find another option.
Terrible. Well, David, I seriously, I look forward to it. Thank you so much for being on with us today and sharing, and love your enthusiasm. Keep doing what you're doing. I look forward to speaking with you again.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on, man.
Thanks. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.